And I'm back too. Welcome back to Talk with TQ. I'm always happy when you come up to the show because I have the most interesting guests on the planet. Yes, I troll the planet for interesting guests. Sometimes I find someone interesting right in my own backyard. So tonight we're going to be interviewing Miss Fern Joseph from the Fern Tree gift shop in Peekskill, New York. But what I'm going to interview her about is not so much about her gift shop. She actually sponsors a program in which people can go on a tour of the historical Underground Railroad. And the Underground Railroad was the route that the slaves from the South took to the North to free themselves from incarceration, aka slavery. So I'm going to have her talk to us about this. Fern, hi. I've taken the tour. I have taken the tour, and it is daunting, but it's worthwhile and very memorable. Now tell the audience how you got involved in this, and maybe you can give us a quick history lesson for people that just don't know or understand about the Underground Railroad, please.
I first started and learned about it actually when I was in school. And my father was an advocate of Black history. So he would talk about, my heritage, where I'm from in Africa, and the slave trade and where we came from and our history and the Underground Railroad. So lo and behold, as time went on and I went to school, graduated, raised my children, there was the Million Women's March.
Yes.
So as a result of the Million Women's March, I went to Philadelphia with a group to find out what was going on and became the New York State coordinator.
Nice.
As a result of that, we got buses all over New York State. We had 30,000 women that went to the Million Women's March from New York State, and we had buses that came out of Peekskill. Well, one of the mantras was for us to come back to our community and make it better than we had found it, and those who grew up here to make it better. So what better way to do that than to, my idea was, with my husband at the time, was to go back and talk to the elders. And we said, okay, we could brainstorm this. What can we do in the community? There's many things you can do, really. You can get on many of the boards and the school boards and help the children. And we said, but there are many of us that were doing it. What else could we do that some people don't think about, and that's knowing who you are and where you're from. It's like, many of our children were getting lost in, thinking that they're going to grow up and be a great hip hop artist, or falling into things that are in the media that are not good for them, but they identified with it because they don't know who they are and where they're from.
Right.
So as we spoke to the elders, one of them started talking about the Underground Railroad coming through Peekskill. And we were like, what? Wait a minute, and
Here?
so and that was Ethel Jackson, and her son had been the mayor of Peekskill. He was the first Black mayor of Peekskill. Well, so Ethel gave us all this information. She wrote a book called My Memories of 100 African American Families in Peekskill, and in the book she wrote about it. She wrote about the Underground Railroad coming through Peekskill and what she had learned from her elders and their elders. Right. And it was wonderful because it was documented. So as a result, we started to research it a little bit, and then we found Kathleen Mosier. And interestingly enough, my cousin was married to her son. So she said, my cousin had told me, well, she knows a lot. And when the NAACP first came to Peekskill, she was the first secretary. She was a historian. Her family dated all the way back to the Revolutionary War, where her family, Peterson, had shot the cannon that stopped Colonel Andre with the West Point plans that just turned around the whole history of the United States during that time. So this woman was so knowledgeable about the history of Peekskill and what had happened here. And she knew a lot about the Underground Railroad. Matter of fact, Kathleen Mosier was also instrumental in getting the Peekskill Museum built and stocked full of, artifacts. Just totally amazing woman. Anyway, so she told us all this information, and we put all this information together. Now we have a new judge that's in Peekskill. She works in White Plains. Her name is Melissa Lure.
Yes.
Well, Melissa's father,
She's a
of course,
friend of
an
the show.
attorney. Right. That's wonderful. And she was doing one of her dissertations when she was going to school. She offered to do the research for us to find out the history in the Underground Railroad in Peekskill. She started us.
Wow, it's
And
amazing.
she really dug in deep, and she gave us something so thick, so much information, that we even went on further to investigate and found out everything was in fact true. So with this, we found actual hiding places that freedom seekers came through Peekskill, and places that they hid. And we met many more elders, Tommy Tinsley and others that are descendants that live in this town of freedom seekers, and some who had even settled here. Right. And so we found these places where they ran to, like Harley Green's home, who was an abolitionist, and the AME Zion Church that was built in 1852 that hid runaways, and many other places, and they came up from the river by way of McGregor's Brook. So,
McGregor's Brook.
Yeah.
Explain where that is, because I was on the tour and I asked a question about, how deep was the water. And so that is down by the river. Is that McGregor's Brook, or is it a different place?
No. It starts at the Hudson, at the river.
Okay.
So what happens is, when you are coming from New York and you're coming up the Hudson, you're coming up, and you're going to see the landline and it comes up. It's fairly.
Yeah.
It goes in and out, but when it gets to Peekskill, it goes way in.
Yeah, almost like an enclave,
Right.
an alcove of water.
Yeah,
Yes.
and it was very high at that time too, the water level, because there were ships that docked here, because Peekskill was an iron ore town, and they made all kinds of potbelly stoves, known for that. Even if you go to the Peekskill Museum, you'll see lots of them. They're absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
And they also made the plows that they used down south during that time.
Yeah.
That they used to yoke freedom seekers, during slavery time. They would yoke us with it, and we'd have to push, and it would have these two pieces of wood, and it would have that metal, and a lot of that was made here.
Yeah.
Anyway, so McGregor, when the freedom seekers would come walking up the waterway, or rowing up the waterway, or even on the train, because there was all kind of little ways that they were able to manipulate the system so that they could get on. One is, if they saw a white person standing by themselves and they had a bag, and the bag was down, and they were getting ready to get on the train, if they had the right clothes on, because they would just walk over and lift up the bag.
Yeah.
So the white person would get on, and then the conductor would think that freedom seeker was with the white person, so he would relegate him to take the bag and put it in the back, and then he'd go further back with those that were slaves of others riding on the train. But see, this guy was getting a free ride. He was not a free ride, but he was just getting his way up.
Yes.
Not to be questioned.
So was it a signal for a white person to have the bag down by their feet like that? Was that a signal that the white people were aware of that would be helpful to the slaves, or was it just...
I'm not even sure about that.
Yeah.
But it could have been in some instances and not in others.
Yeah.
Because privilege makes you just take many things for granted.
So if someone comes over and they happen to be black, and they pick up your bag and say, "I'll help you with your bag," it's like, yeah, you can help me with my bag.
But they're not even saying it. Again, privilege sometimes goes without even words.
Yeah, you just do it.
You just go and they get on and they figure, well, he may work for them. They're not looking at the fact that he may pick the bag and run away with it. He's not doing that.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So some things.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so anyway, by the time they would get up into the region by the river, there would be this enclave, and then over to the right of it, there was a waterway. And it was a waterway almost as if it was dug out, but it was a waterway that went up, and it was going north. And you could walk the waterway all the way through. And I'm not sure about how deep it was, but I know that they said they walked it.
Yeah.
So it could have been up to here. It could have been to here.
Right.
But they walked it, and one of the reasons why they walked it too was because a dog could smell you unless you're in the water.
Oh, right.
So many of the freedom seekers, that was something that they learned.
Because they knew they were being tracked every which way.
Definitely, they were being tracked, and so they would go up McGregor's Brook, and McGregor's Brook would come all the way for what we know right now as the bakery our wonderful famous bakery.
Yeah, right, home style,
and it would come past the Lincoln Depot, and it would come all the way up into town. As a matter of fact, it comes up Central Avenue.
Yes.
And it comes right past the Fern Tree.
Yes, it does.
Right. So, because once it hits Central Avenue and Division, it keeps going all the way up. It goes right past the church and everything. So, many of the places where they were able to hide was on that waterway. Because where the Fern Tree is, there used to be a farm.
Right.
And across the street there was a farm, and that was the Brown farm. So in between was McGregor's Brook. And you could still follow McGregor's Brook till today and see the water.
That's amazing. It's amazing. It was a great tour to take for someone. I had never taken it. And, first you give a wonderful presentation at the beginning of the tour, all throughout the tour. And it's like you feel like, it's almost like, your sister's telling you a story, is telling you some history, and you feel almost like you're there. And we were at the point just before McGregor's Brook. I had asked you how deep it was, and you said that sort of was the impetus for the song "Wade in the Water," and that's what the spiritual wade in the water really means.
That's right.
Yeah, I didn't know that until then.
Well, it was a signal, and even in the movie, they gave us some truths in the movie Harriet.
Harriet Tubman.
She would sing, and it would be a signal that she was there and it was time to go.
Right.
But there were many signals and ways for them to get off of plantations.
Yes.
With Harriet, she never lost a passenger, but I know, when you read slave stories and slave testimony, that everybody didn't make it. Some got caught and hung.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, but it's like and when we found out about what had happened in Peekskill, we were totally blown away.
Yeah.
So of course we went to the mayor's office and we, put together a tour in 1997.
So it's been a while since you've been doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Long time. We've been touring and oh wow. Yeah, that is a long time, isn't it?
It's a beautiful tour in that at first it's kind of like, you're getting this great history lesson. I have to say I was lucky that it was on a gorgeous day. It wasn't like you had to deal with any kind of weather conditions. And you usually do the tours on days like that anyway, I've noticed. Pretty much.
Yeah, well, sometimes we do get wet days. But you know what? Freedom seekers ran in the rain.
Right, exactly. But, even on a nice day, when you get to the point of the tour where you're actually going literally underground, I would say, and you're going through that area that's off of Route 6.
Henry Ward Beecher's property, Harriet Tubman, Harriet Beecher Stowe's brother, they had their summer home there.
Okay.
So her house still stands.
Yes, it does.
His burnt down, they built it back, and they have since turned them into condos. But the tunnel, part of it is still there where he hid, where freedom seekers were able to be until he could bring them up to the main house, which only, basically took a day because they checked every day.
Yeah.
And when the bounty hunter would come and look at them and say, oh, well, we looking for this one and we looking for that one. And he'd say, well, we don't have them.
Oh.
Oh, well, back then, preachers were like the police. They were like the captain, and you can't dispute what they're saying to you.
Yeah.
But Henry Ward Beecher was a real abolitionist. He really, really was. He didn't like what was going on. He would take slaves from bounty hunters. He would take slaves from those getting ready to go on the auction block, and he would bring them to his church. And there was one such woman. He brought the woman to the church, and he gave a sermon that was amazing, where the people, they passed the hat, because he said, we have to buy them their freedom by this woman. And so they put the money in the hat. Women were taking off their jewelry.
Wow.
They bought the woman from the auctioneer, and the woman had a son, and they had enough to get the son too. Then they bought the woman a house, got her some chickens, and she sold chickens and eggs for the rest of her life in a house here in Peekskill.
See, that's really rich. That's very rich history. Very rich history. The part of the tour I would say that was most daunting, and I was surprised, and it was funny. You don't want to get stuck in there. You think it's going to be okay. Everything was really good up to this point. You go through this tunnel, and it's the terrain is not the easiest to walk.
Right.
Okay, and it's extremely dark, and you really have to sort of be mindful about where you are, and you can get lost in like the vibe of that tunnel. As I know, you can get lost in that.
Yeah.
And if you don't have light, and all of a sudden you think what happened, what happened. I was saying, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And I really and I sat down at the top, and somebody said, oh, she's sitting where Harriet is. And then I realized I was alone. And it was very scary. You really got a feel for what it was like for the freedom seekers, because it's not for the faint of heart. No. But I think that if you really know what freedom is, or you can smell freedom and you can feel what it's supposed to be like, you would do it. I would say that even doing that last part, which I have to say I was frightened. It was so dark, and the terrain was so dicey. I mean, you could fall, you could hurt yourself. I think that you'll really get the feeling for what it was like for them. I recommend people do it when they don't think much of it, But Harriet Tubman, who's an American hero, she led these slaves to freedom. And how many times did she go back and forth?
19.
Yeah, so she'd do a whole thing. How many miles?
I don't know how many miles she put on herself, but let me tell you, she went back and forth 19 times, and she helped 300 people to freedom, which really, I learned that, and all the time I learned about the history of Harriet Tubman from when my dad started telling me about it when I was at least 10, if not younger. And when I saw the movie said it was 77 people.
Wow.
And I was so disappointed. And then when I Googled it, it said the same thing the movie said. No. But when you look at all the old books, it said 300 people. And I'm saying, how did it change? Why did it change? What's going on?
Yeah, how could it go from 300 to 77?
I don't know. I have to do the research, but I'm telling you, I'm ready. I have to call the homesteader, but it's like I'm saying, wait a minute, how do you change history like that? What happened? So, of course, when I was in the theater and I saw it written on the screen, I yelled, no, it was 300, which was so bad. Everybody looked at me and said, oh, no, you got to tell the truth.
You have to tell the truth.
I'm disappointed because the history is being somewhat diminished. It's like, what are you doing? Yeah. What's going on?
Well, think about it. You really didn't have Harriet Tubman's or Harriet Beecher Stowe's name in the history books until into the mid 20th century. So that all the information was hidden. So I imagine at this point they have certain criteria for documentation. But I would go to the Smithsonian. That's what I do. Or, better yet, the Stromberg.
Yeah, I know them at the Schomburg. And see,
the Schomburg.
At the Schomburg, they have it written as 300 people as well.
I would go straight to them.
So, there may be a reason why they said 70 for whatever that they can actually document, But we have to remember, it was a grassroots effort.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there were elders who during those slave testimonies, they saw it.
Yeah.
they lived it.
Right. They lived it.
They lived it. They lived it, and it was documented. So, I will definitely find out. I'll come back and tell you too.
Please. Is there anyone still alive that really might have couldn't be? Well,
No,
no, yeah, they're all dead because we're talking like
we're talking about
2 centuries, 3 centuries.
1820s, 30s, 40s,
Yeah,
50s,
yeah.
60s.
Wow.
And even the 17s. Because let me tell you, Harley Green in the 1830s was a free black man who married Harriet Green, and they had many children in the area. But this man in the 1830s was an abolitionist. He was a conductor. And in the 1830s, 40s, 50s, this man saved so many people and hid so many runaways. And he was very good friends with, the Quakers.
Yes.
And he did 30, I believe it was 36 land deals, buying and selling. But he was a mogul back then. Could you imagine?
Yes, I can imagine.
So, and he had his own barbershop in Peekskill, and he encouraged many other people of color to vote.
Yes. And I'll say that anyone watching this particular program, the next time you go over to Stowe Road to see your dermatologist or doctor, whoever's over there, that's who it's named as. It's named after Harriet Beecher Stowe, and that's part of the whole legacy of the Underground Railroad.
Yeah.
Now, do you have a website for the Underground Railroad, or can someone contact you at the Fern Tree about a tour?
They can call me directly. My number is 914-382-9226. They can go on to the site. Once you go onto the site, it gives you a virtual tour.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
You can take a virtual tour, and then you can, contact us, and we'll take you on a tour. We do group rates. We take schools. We take everybody.
Yes.
Everybody. We absolutely, it's just real important to us. The organizations I do it with, which is a not-for-profit, Sisters in Support, it's very important for us to tell the history, not lose the history, tell the real truth about it. And it's our history. And what's important is that the children understand where they came from, who they are, the shoulders that they stand on, and what you fought for. So it's inspirational to know you had the perseverance, the stamina in your blood.
It's part of your DNA.
Absolutely. So you can be anything you want to be.
Yes.
And do what you want. And build and, be productive in your culture and in your society. And it's powerful.
When you go into that tunnel, and you realize how dark and how frightening it must have been. I imagine there were people that did take children with them. I just kind of had this feeling when I went through there, I had this feeling of having a child with me and a child next to me, I mean, I don't have kids, and I was alone, and it's very scary if you start to empathize with what they went through and how frightening it must have been. But then when you think about why,
That's right.
there's a whole different feeling comes on you.
That's right.
And then when I came out of that tunnel into that beautiful daylight and everybody's kind of looking around, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I actually got through this. How did they do it? How did they
free.
Yes.
It's like a being reborn, because you go in one way and you come out another.
Right.
And it's like being reborn,
Exactly.
and you're free. So it's good. It's good to be able to experience that, because there was pain and there was horror behind. For them to have to be a little afraid, and maybe a lot afraid,
Of course.
and go through the darkness,
And you don't really
in the
know.
hopes of seeing some light, it was better than the horror
that they left behind.
Sure. And then some of those that were left behind were persecuted because they didn't tell when
and
they
they
left
knew.
and which direction they went. So, there was always that problem as well. But those who moved forward,
Yeah.
But the determination to be free or to those are the shoulders that we are on.
And the other thing is with Harriet Tubman, okay, I can imagine the kind of mind she had, because there were all kinds of, I'd say, tools, apparatus for people to be able to communicate without letting on to actually where they were and how they got there. You had the quilt patches. Mm-hmm. That's something that you talk about during the tour. I'm getting chills right now. Yeah. The quilt patches, that's so fascinating, where each patch had a different meaning, and you were actually directing the people on the tour to understand these patches when they came upon them, when they were in the section that you were actually in the woods. Mm-hmm. And there was the
but imagine, many people remembered it and many forgot it.
Yeah.
And back then you had to have a great memory, a phenomenal memory, only because there was nothing written down.
It wasn't like documented, but it was known up here and it was passed
and
along.
So you could, if you see it, you know which way. You'd be like, oh wow, okay,
Yeah.
so let's follow the North Star, because you'd see
right.
that quilt.
Yeah.
That
quilt patch.
Yeah.
The quilt patches, and maybe
but many of our folks did not. Some didn't remember it.
Well,
and we have so much going on in our lives.
Yeah.
And things that are really important.
Right.
That was a wake-up call for me, because things that are really important,
mm-hmm.
I was forgetting. And I said, okay, let me concentrate.
Yeah.
And pay attention.
Yeah.
Because I have to be present. And
prioritize, compartmentalize, and I think that it's a beautiful tour. I think every American should take your tour. I really feel that way. Mm-hmm. I don't care what color you are, mm-hmm. You should take the tour. And if you come to visit the United States, and if you're not from this country, if you're not from this area in New York, mm-hmm. this is definitely a family trip. Come down to Peekskill, come up to Peekskill.
Come up.
And definitely get in touch with Fern at the Fern Tree.
Phone number, 914-382-9226.
Yes, do that, please.
Just get in touch with me, because we would be more than happy mm-hmm. to take everyone on this tour.
It's so worth it.
And it's just what you said. It doesn't matter who you are, what color you are. Come, take the tour with us, and learn our history.
It will humble you and inspire you at the same time.
That's right.
It's so worth it, That's right. I'm so glad I did it. It gave me a renewed sense of pride. I never lost it, but it really galvanized and it amplified my mm-hmm. pride mm-hmm. in myself as a Black person, as an African American Black person, mm-hmm. and as an American. I feel that it's something we should all do mm-hmm. because it's part of our history, no matter who you are. And I thank you, Fern, for being on the show, and I thank you for coming back to the show. And please, I love getting your emails, with your comments. And I'll see you next time. Bye.
Telling our story.
Yes, we are.
Ashe.
Old as I am, it was still an eye-opener to see what our ancestors have gone through to just survive.